Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Invisible Innocence. I am your host, Megan Moret, and today I want to talk some more about trafficking here within the United States and what that looks like. There has been so much buzz around this topic the last several years, and most of us think that we are immune to this, that this would never happen to us or our children. Trafficking, like many other horrible things, it does not discriminate. It is not isolated to one race, ethnic group, religion, country, demographic, or social status. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, whether they are rich or poor. It can also affect any individual, regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. With that being said, there are definitely people that are at a greater risk than others, and we're going to talk about that. Why has this topic suddenly gained so much traction? It's definitely not because it's a new crime. Human trafficking has been around since the beginning of time. Are people just now becoming more comfortable discussing it? I would say the answer is yes. I think that exposure and all around awareness have allowed this topic to be discussed more freely, less stigma. And because of that, we are able to educate communities and bring attention, which then brings prevention. The numbers and statistics around human trafficking are highly valued and sought after, yet these numbers are really inconsistent and highly misinterpreted. Because human trafficking is underreported and misidentified, there is no true, set, clear figure as to how many victims there are worldwide or in the US. Literally, just a fraction of trafficking cases gets reported. Many victims don't even have access to any source of communication to report their situation. What we do know is that this is a $150 billion a year industry. This crime is motivated by money, money, money. Human trafficking responds to and is driven by demand, and the demand is through the roof. It's the demand for cheap goods and commercialized sex. As I have mentioned before, the most common form of human trafficking is sexual exploitation. Women and girls are the primary victims of sex trafficking. And what is surprising and breaking with this normal stereotype is that in many countries, women are the main perpetrators of trafficking. This to me is so unimaginable that a woman would subject another woman or girls to such cruelty. It is really horrible to think about, and this really gets me for some reason. As a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, as a friend, I just cannot imagine putting anyone through these types of cruel, cruel situations. Let's talk about some misconceptions surrounding human trafficking. The first myth is that it only happens in developing countries. The reality is, human trafficking occurs worldwide in developed countries and is not limited to any region or economic status. The second myth: human trafficking always involves force or kidnapping. The reality is, many victims are manipulated or coerced through psychological means. They are defrauded rather than controlled through outright physical force. This can include tactics such as false job promises, fake marriages, or threats of going to law enforcement. Myth number 3: human trafficking only involves sex trafficking. Reality is, labor trafficking includes involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, slavery, and other forced labor. And this can happen in almost any industry. Myth 4, victims will always ask for help if they are being trafficked. The reality is, victims often fear retribution or harm to themselves or their families. They may also be manipulated into thinking that the authorities cannot be trusted. They have fear, shame, immigration status worries, and language barriers can prevent victims from seeking help. Myth 5, human trafficking involves the movement or transportation of a person across state or national borders. The reality is, human trafficking is often confused with human smuggling, which involves illegal border crossings. Human trafficking does not require the crossing of borders. It can occur within countries, states, and communities. It is not solely an issue of transitional crime. Myth number 6, only women and girls can be victims of sex trafficking. Men and boys also fall victim to sex trafficking. The exploitation occurs regardless of gender, age, or background. Male victims are less likely to be identified. LGBTQIA boys and young men are particularly vulnerable. Myth number 7, if the trafficked person consents to their initial situation, it cannot be human trafficking. And this is so false. The initial consent to commercial sex or a labor setting is irrelevant if the perpetrator uses force, fraud, or coercion to maintain control over the victim. Commercial sex of a minor is always sex trafficking, regardless of consent. So once again, commercial sex of a minor is always sex trafficking, even if that minor consents to it. Myth number 8, individuals in trafficking situations are physically held captive and are unable to leave their situation. The reality is, while sometimes this can be the case, individuals in trafficking situations more often remain captive owing to a variety of reasons. Some simply lack the resources to leave that trafficking situation, such as transportation or stable housing. Others are afraid for their own or for their family's safety, and others are so effectively manipulated that they do not yet identify as being under the control of another person. Brainwashing. Myth number 9, traffickers only target people they do not know. The reality is, many survivors have been trafficked by romantic partners, family members, parents, or supposed friends. The last myth, human trafficking is only a criminal issue and not a human rights issue. The reality is, human trafficking is a violation of human rights. It involves the exploitation and abuse of individuals, depriving them of their freedom and dignity. Addressing human trafficking requires both legal measures and a human rights perspective. So, after reading all of this, it is safe to say that anyone, anywhere, regardless of gender or socioeconomic group, can become a victim of trafficking. And I hate to say it, but it can happen much easier than you think. It is so easy for a trafficker to manipulate their victim. They will find someone that is depressed, lonely, sad, or just down on their luck. It can happen in the blink of an eye and right before your eyes. I want to talk about the COVID pandemic for a minute. This particular time really brought exploitation to a high. So during the pandemic, we know that schools are closed, and schools can be the main source of shelter, nourishment, structure, and safety for many children. During the pandemic, children must stay home. For many kids, the parents had to continue working either in the home or away. For some parents, they lost their jobs or businesses were closed, and this left them at a high vulnerability. And because of this, so many people were tricked into fake job interviews, fake workplaces, false promises of being paid for work. For some kids, they were out in the streets looking for food or income, and this made them an easy target as well. Many children were left unattended or with very little supervision during this time. The kids might go outside more often, looking for interaction or just some socialization. In many neighborhoods, this leads to no good. The wrong people just lurking around the corner to take advantage of these kids that they see as a potential target. Now, there may have been many kids that didn't go outside. They stayed inside. And most kids have access to a phone or a computer or an iPad or something with internet accessibility. This is why online exploitation went up by 60% during the epidemic. And mostly, this was due to social media. This right here is a trafficker's best case scenario. This is their dream. They have all of these kids that have become lonely, depressed, desperate for friends, desperate for interaction. They might just be bored and they have zero supervision. Now we have hundreds of thousands of children that have become 10 times more vulnerable, and not to mention 10 times easier to reach. Traffickers are actors, and they will portray whatever character they need to in order to entice a victim. They may act as an employer, a friend, a romantic partner, you name it. And as we all know, it is literally possible to talk to just about anyone via social media. Any type of person. They might have the same likes, shared interests, dating, gaming. You can find a group of just about any kind on social media. A determined trafficker is willing to spend hours and hours every day prowling and trolling around looking for their next victim. Contact can happen on just about any social media site or app. So parents, please be nosy and check your kids' phones or tools that can give them access to the internet. Someone can be trafficked right under your nose. They can be living in the same home with you. They can be having breakfast and dinner with you 7 days a week. The traffickers are great at dangling carrots when the trust has been established. They may ask you if you want that new iPhone or those Air Force Ones. How about a Louis Vuitton purse? AirPods, maybe those Lulu leggings that you've been looking at. And this doesn't mean that someone just poof disappears and they're kidnapped and they start living in some random apartment or dark hotel room and you never see them again. Like I said, this can happen right before your eyes. It could be someone living in your home that you see every single day. It only takes a few hours for someone to be trafficked, just a few hours for someone to be sexually violated and exploited. Just a few hours for a trafficker to break promises, to lie, and to force someone into these horrific situations. And just before the victim goes home, the threats are given again. If you tell, I will kill you. I will take away the things that I have given you. I will beat you. And maybe one of the sickest threats of all is that I will kill your family or rape or abuse your brother or sister. It's not like the movies we have seen. It is way easier and can be much darker in many, many cases. Again, who exactly is at risk? We think that our children are great. We think that they're happy. Many of us think that our children are perfect. We don't think that our child could ever be in this situation. My kid is smart, happy, funny, doesn't do drugs, has nice clothes, nice friends. We talk, we communicate. They have a job. Our kids are not perfect, and neither are we. And kids can be really, really complicated. They are searching for themselves. They can be hormonal, seeking out relationships, trying to find out where exactly they fit in, just wanting acceptance and approval from both parents and peers. Many of these children can be homeless or throwaways, victims of abuse or maltreatment. They have very low self-esteem. They may be a sexual minority or be in the LGBTQ community. They may be in conflict with parents or caregivers, substance abuse, criminality, or poverty within their family, gang affiliation, children in foster care, difficulty in school with peers, searching for love and acceptance. Personally, and unfortunately, I know so many children that can check the box for several, if not all, of these. But it only takes one box to be more vulnerable. I would also like to stress that by no means, if your child checks one, all, or just some of these boxes, it does not mean that they are being trafficked. It just means that they could be more vulnerable or at a higher risk. We have all had low points in our lives, and we have all experienced times when we were searching for those friendships or groups or somewhere to just belong. This is a part of life, just growing and evolving. But there are some people and children who need us to give them just a little bit extra attention. We need to check in with them a little bit more. We need to be able to ask uncomfortable questions, be willing to have some constructive, confrontational conversations. If it means finding answers, we need to be willing to check phone messages, block certain apps on their phones or tablets, and really just be aware of our kids' behavior. If you suspect something and your gut tells you something is not right, you need to go with that feeling. There are many times where these adults that see something not right in a child might not be a parent or a caregiver, and they may be someone like a teacher or a coworker, a babysitter, a coach, a doctor, someone in law enforcement, just a neighbor, anyone close enough to know or feel that something is not quite right. Please, please, please just take a minute and make a phone call that may change this person's life. If you are a mandated reporter like myself, then you know what to do. If you are not, and you have the least bit of concern that you or someone you know is being trafficked or exploited in any way, please call 911. Or as a resource, you can call the Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope I was able to answer some questions. So we will see you next time, and in the meantime, stay safe and stay smart.